Uganda's oil and gas sector has transitioned from having only an exploration to new explorations and preparation of the discovered oil fields for production. The developments also include putting in place infrastructure for both commercialization of the discovered 6.5 billion barrels of oil and gas resources and facilitating the developments in the sector. The final investment decision for Uganda's oil and gas projects, approximately worth $20 billion, was signed in February 2022. This was by the Uganda National Oil Company with its joint partners Total EP Uganda and the Chinese National Oil Company and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development.
The jobs created. There's the skilled labor, there is the semi-skilled labor, there is the unskilled labor, and you're looking at like 160,000 jobs across all projects being created in this period, right? So those are things that make any country smile when you have such huge projects coming into your place, because it sends a signal. The people internally are happy, there's money, and it has spin-off effects. The jobs, they are evident. The investor confidence that we can rally this kind of investor right now into our economy sends a very good signal for us internationally. And that's what you want as a country. So definitely we are seeing this contribution as something the long awaited for.
The policy framework for the oil and gas sector highlights key issues, including 7 sets of regulations on technical, health, safety and environment, national content, among others. All major oil and gas developments, including the Tilenga, Kingfisher, the East African crude oil pipeline and the refinery projects, were first subjected to a preliminary environmental and social screening process that informed the conceptual design of the projects. Subsequently, a rigorous risk impact assessment process was undertaken in line with the national environment laws and the international best practices. The environmental challenge is the management of impacts associated with the oil and gas industry, like the oil spills, fires, waste management, contamination of the environment, and therefore there is a potential risk to adversely impact on areas located within the graben like the national game parks, forests, and water bodies, including Lake Albert and River Nile.
Before any project is commenced, the National Environment Management Authority has to issue what we call an ESIA, Environmental Social Impact Assessment Report. How is that obtained? The company has to demonstrate. It has to demonstrate to NEMA that we have these systems in place to ensure that we are not going to affect the environment where we are operating, we are not going to affect the people, we are not going to affect the plantation and so on, the forest cover, all these aspects. So before that license or that permit is issued, there is supposed to be a public hearing where the people affected by a project are invited and the project speaks to them in the presence of NEMA and other critical government authorities.
In an article written by Dr. Joseph Kobsheshe, a director of Environment and Health Safety at Petroleum Authority of Uganda, he states the oil and gas industry could be a solution to greenhouse gas emissions reduction. This is by providing more Ugandans access to cleaner energy, eliminate emissions associated with import of petroleum products, provide alternative sources of livelihoods such as LPG, and lessen the dependency on environmentally degrading economic systems.
The opportunity now has been that actually the goal of the sector is to ensure that when petroleum activities in these areas cease, we are leaving the area in a much better place than we found it, and that we call the net gain program. So the net gain program being implemented within the Action Falls National Park is aimed at ensuring that overall there is a net positive gain in terms of biodiversity as we implement the petroleum activities.
The category of emissions is expected to increase as Uganda becomes more prosperous through industrialization. Likewise, the emissions from the energy sector are expected to increase as more Ugandans access energy and our country moves closer to ending energy poverty. The Petroleum Authority of Uganda says a rich regulatory framework that came with these projects of such magnitude will also be used to regulate similar activities in the future.
A number of environmental laws, regulations, standards incorporating oil and gas aspects have been developed. Just as an example, the Petroleum Waste Management Regulations of 2019, we never used to have those. Those were developed in 2019, and they guide the way in which petroleum waste is managed. The National Oil Spill Regulations of 2020, again, these regulate the prevention, preparedness, and response to oil spills. The National Oil Spill Contingency Plan, again, very specific in terms of how the strategic environment assessment, which was developed in 2013, and the list could go on.
National Environmental Management Authority acknowledges the sensitivity of projects such as the Tilenga project earmarked by Total that has launched biodiversity programs to conserve the flora and fauna of the areas in which they operate.
Purposes of this project, sensitivity mapping was done for the area to identify which area is more sensitive in terms of conservation. After mapping the sensitive areas, then you apply avoidance so that you avoid the sensitive areas, for example, fishing breeding areas or breeding sites for wildlife. You avoid them. Areas where wildlife, for example, leak salt leak areas, you avoid them, So you identify sensitive areas and you avoid them. That's avoidance. But like I said, from avoidance, you go next. But before you leave avoidance, for example, the pipeline has avoided wetlands of international importance, all Ramsar sites have been avoided, protected areas have been avoided as much as possible, water bodies. So that's avoidance. This is the initial stage. Now, after you've avoided, you go into mitigating or reducing impact. And that's largely about the scale, really, and the technology you employ.
Statistics demonstrate that no one-size-fits approach if the world is to tackle the climate change problem. Uganda's greenhouse gas emissions from industrial processes and the products are just 0.55% of its total emissions.
For instance, the East African crude oil pipeline is going to be largely buried. It's going to be underground. It is also going to be insulated. And all these are measures to ensure that the operation of that pipeline does not affect the people, it does not affect the environment. There is going to be plantation. We are going to plant trees along the pipeline route to ensure that whatever was destroyed during the construction has been replaced and much more.
It's not enough to mitigate and reduce, but we also want to deal with what will remain when we've done everything else. What will remain? What land will remain under use so that we compensate it? Not compensating it in terms of money for payment, in terms of conservation value.
In a nutshell, a robust policy, legal, institutional, monitoring, and compliance enforcement framework has been put in place to ensure that oil and gas activities mutually coexist with the environment and social well-being of communities in the areas in which the activities are being undertaken. It is therefore important that Ugandans do not allow themselves to be used to demonize the country's oil and gas projects, while other countries continue to use their oil and gas resources to prosper. Rana Nahabwe, Smart 24 TV.